You can push for results, or you can create the conditions where they happen.
Welcome to Rise to Lead, where unique perspectives redefine leadership.
Welcome to Rise to Lead. Here with me today is Scott Doggett from Florida. Scott is the founder of the National Academy of Leadership Development and author of Priceless: See People Differently, Lead People Better. With over 30 years in leadership and development, he focuses on one core idea. When people feel valued, performance follows. And I know you have a lot more ideas than that, Scott. But that's what I read out of your bio, right? What I extracted from that. His work challenges leaders to rethink how they see and lead others, especially under pressure. Scott, welcome to the show.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Now, Scott, before we get into your work, which I'm very curious about, of course, what led you here? What experiences shaped your focus on how leaders see and value people?
I think leadership has been a constant in my life from childhood all the way through where I am
Hmm.
today, starting with my dad growing up was a middle school principal. So I went to a very small school growing up and all on one campus, kindergarten through 12th grade. So we all, uh, 300 students in a very small school. So I get to watch my father lead as a middle school principal, and he was my first role model to see what leadership really looked like, and really inspired me to want to be a leader. And so I went to school and I studied leadership, and I spent the first 30 years of my career in hospitality, leading teams in both operations, but then also in training and development, and studied leadership. Been a studier of leadership, and so I've seen the impact that leadership has on not just on performance, but also just on people in general and how they're able to grow and grow in confidence. And so it's always inspired me. And specifically, servant leadership has been a style of leadership that I've always been attracted to, and that it's always fascinated me. And so life events led me to, unfortunately, a layoff for the first time in my career a couple of years ago, and it sent me on a journey to try to figure out what else I could do with these skills that had kind of developed in me for these 30 years, and led me to a nonprofit organization where I got to see servant leadership used in a way that I've never seen in my entire career. World Vision USA, World Vision is a great international organization that does incredible work around the globe. And every single executive leader at that organization were true servant leaders. And so I got to experience that for a short time and got to see the results that that organization generated. And so internally, from an employee perspective, nobody ever wanted to leave that organization. Their turnover was single digits. And I came from an industry where, turnover was usually, 100% sometimes, right? And so that really inspired me to leave. And when I got laid off, unfortunately, uh, it really inspired me to go out and write this book and create this academy and go out and show other organizations how this style of leadership can really help create these healthy organizations, these healthy cultures where employees can feel seen and valued and respected, and the results that come from that type of culture.
Okay, so let's just out of curiosity, what was the hospitality work? Was that at a hotel?
Yeah, I ran for
Yes.
the first half of my career. I ran hotels and resorts all over
Uh-huh.
the US and loved every minute of it. And then through that experience, I got to open some resorts in Hawaii and Vegas and Atlantic City. And through that opening process, I fell in love with training and just this idea of being able to take the knowledge that I had and teach that to others. I just fell in love with training. And so I made a pivot back in 2006 and went from operating and running hotels and resorts to then training others and specifically training leaders. And that's where I really fell in love with leadership development. That was kind of that pivot
Okay.
for me.
Okay. Yeah, I always am very hesitant to, you know, back any organizations these days, especially 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 like global ones, because we know that so much is going on that's not really ethically correct under the umbrella of philanthropy. So I'm just going to hold myself back here a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely look more into this work. Okay, so you talk about rehumanizing leadership. So what's the moment you realized leadership had become dehumanized in the first place? And by the way, I also talk about humanizing leadership in my work. So I'm really, really curious to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I think I think there's been a lot of just world events where it really kind of comes to life. And I think back to even the events of 9/11 that happened here in the US, or the banking crisis of 2008, or what we all experienced through COVID. Uh, I mean, I can just name all these major events. What I really experienced from a leadership perspective is there were really two types of leaders that I saw kind of rise during these moments. There were leaders that said, okay, this is a moment where we need to come together and take care of our people and put people first. And then there were leaders that took their eye off of people and said, we need to focus on the numbers. We need to do whatever we can to to keep the lights on, which I get. But people took a second, took a back seat. And then seeing what happened, getting through those events and the aftermath, the organizations that took care of the people were able to recover very quickly and were able to continue and grow. And the ones that didn't really struggled. And so I really, and I experienced that personally, but I also witnessed it around me. And even just the way layoffs were handled throughout my career, I saw organizations handle even layoffs humanly, and then done in ways that would make you cry, that made me cry, seeing people that have worked for organizations for 25, 30 years and then just being handed a cardboard box by a complete stranger and then disappear. And so again, that's where I really started to put all this together to see the impact that leadership has, again, not just on performance and results, but on us as human beings and our value and our worth as people.
Yeah, and I mean, during times like the lockdown, so I don't call it COVID because I don't know what
Yeah.
that is. So nobody knows. I mean, I have a clue due to my research, but so there was very little leadership, and also in the aftermath, because hardly anybody dared stand up. Hardly any so-called leaders dared stand up for and stand up against the agenda that was imposed. So I saw very little leadership. And it's actually also one
Yeah.
of the reasons why I created this podcast, because I wanted to, bring other perspectives as well to leadership that aren't always talked about, because we talk about leadership so much, but then what is that really? And does it also mean that I have to really, be able to swim against the stream when it's actually better for my people and for myself, right? And I did a lot of that during those times, but
Sure.
it's not even, you don't even have to do that much, but at least your minimum. And even also, you mentioned 9/11, how many leaders stood up and told people to search for the truth. Because again, we were told a story that is absolute bogus. So, and it's still, the narrative is still out there. So this, I think leadership needs to take a whole new turn, which also, in my opinion, has to do with rehumanizing, and that's why I also ask for your take on it, because there's so many aspects and so many facets of it that
Sure.
we could take it from many sides.
And I think even and now when today, like AI is
Mhm.
a hot topic, right? Everybody
Yeah.
is There's a lot of stress right now in the workplace around, what does this mean for my job? Is my job even going to exist in another year or two? And so that added stress, I think, is also demanding this additional uh, type of leadership where we can come in and help bring some relief, bring some love into the workplace to say, this doesn't have to be scary, but I think it is scary. And I think, again, how we approach this at this time is so critical. Right now, what I'm hearing a lot of is, hey, you better learn this or else, you're going to
Mhm.
become obsolete and there's
Yeah.
people at the door waiting for your job. And that's not helping, right? That's just creating more and more stress. And it's also creating a lot of resistance, which is leading to a lot of the failures of the AI adoption. Failure rates are like 80, 90% right now. And I think people are treating it as an IT project or like an IT shift, and it really isn't. It really is a change, right? It's a cultural shift, and we need to be looking at it like that, and not as an IT project.
Right, I totally agree with you on that. Absolutely, it's a much bigger animal than
Yes,
not that IT is not big. Hey, I mean, you know, I'm not certainly not the best at IT. So yes, absolutely, it is it's a very comprehensive project that includes a lot of communication, a lot of training, a lot of positioning and also
mhm,
even how AI is used, not just how it's brought
yeah,
to employees, but also how it's used, right? Because there
right,
are more ethical and less ethical. Well, again, what is ethical anyway? Everything is subjective. However, you know, yes, there are uses that might be, in my humble opinion, more ethical than others. So, even in this context, right, that you just mentioned, even in AI, so many leaders say they value their people, yet teams or team members don't necessarily feel it. So,
right.
what, in your opinion, is the disconnect? What's breaking down in between?
I think sometimes leaders think they know what's important to their employees, and I'm always fascinated by the studies that come out when they ask employees to rank. What are those job factors that motivate you, and then they ask leaders to rank those same factors, and there's always that variance, right? There's always that gap. And leaders will put money at the top usually somewhere, and employees are always saying, no, it's not the money. It's I need to be recognized and appreciated, and I want to feel in on things. And so, I think it really is about getting to know your people. And I think this is the biggest gap that I see time and time again is that we don't take the time as leaders to really get to know each individual on our team that we lead
Mhm.
and get to know them and their strengths and their struggles and how do they like to communicate and what is that story that they're walking around telling themselves, because that story, if I can get that story out of them, then I have all the answers, right? I know, and again, even when we talk about culture, I think sometimes leaders think that culture is what we say it is or what we try to make it, whereas the reality is culture is what I, the employee, say it is. It's my experience, and that experience is defined so much by those leadership behaviors. But I think that's the gap. I think we need to get to know our people better, and then so much of it can be fixed. There's so much low hanging fruit out there. We just don't take the time to talk to our people.
Yeah, I believe a lot of leaders actually think that culture is somehow the mission statement and the vision
Yeah,
statement and a little bit more, the
yeah,
10 rules they have on how to treat people, customers or clients or their employees, but that's not really what it is. Um, and yeah, and what we call culture is yeah, it's not the felt not felt in the same way by everybody in an
right.
organization, right? So you mentioned story, right? And that
Yeah,
story that we carry, our self story to call it something, is also connected to our self-worth. And
yes.
you also, if I think I saw that somewhere, you connect self-worth with performance, and I certainly can get that. So where do
Yeah.
leaders unintentionally damage that link potentially?
I think what happens, and I think this is human, right? I think what we do is we tend to equate someone's worth with their work or with their um, performance level, their title, their personality traits. We equate worth with a lot of things other than their true worth, which I believe is what I call priceless, or people are invaluable, right? And I think that is what we try to teach, is that that should be the first thing that you do when you look at someone in the eyes, is to recognize that that person in front of you is a priceless human being, right? You can't put a price tag on that person. And because truly the way that you see someone is the way that you're going to treat that person. So if you see someone less than priceless, right? If you see somebody who is, you know, less valuable, or oh, you're clumsy, you're worthless, you're that's how you treat them, and that's how you make them feel also. So part of leadership is starting to see people based on their true worth, and if you can treat them based on their worth, you make them feel that way, and that has such a positive influence on that story that they're telling themselves about themselves, and that just generates such more positive emotions, that builds confidence, and then that translates right into performance. So I think what we tend to do is we see somebody coming in late or making mistakes, and we start to attack the behavior, and that does more harm than it does good, because when we start to attack, or we start to make people feel bad about those mistakes or whatever it is, the story gets worse now, and now we start to feel worse about ourselves, and now we start to make even more mistakes, and so now we've made that cycle. We've worsened the situation versus really focusing in first and foremost on treating them as a human being. And I think that that is something that we forget to see people based on their worth.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, oftentimes we measure people's worth or value. They're not exactly the same, but they are
Yeah.
related, right? I can talk about my work's value, and I can use certain parameters to measure the value of my work potentially. However, my worth as a person is always intrinsically limitless,
Yes.
isn't it? Because it's
Yes.
not measured by my output. And I think that's something, yeah, if we use that as a premise before then we get to know that human being,
Yes.
then that can make a big difference for sure. So thanks for pointing that out.
And that's just throughout my career. And I've had employees, and again, getting to know your people, then you know when they're having a bad day, you know when they're off a little bit. And then and from servant leadership is about you serving your people. It's about you wanting to help people grow and help people get better. And it's not about avoiding hard conversations. It's about actually having those hard conversations because you want to help people uh, be the best they can be, and get those results. And I remember back when I was a general manager of a resort, I had one of my top performers at the front desk was having an off time in her life, and I recognized that, and I was able to bring her in, and I didn't attack the fact that she was coming in late and she was not being as friendly with the guests, but really just out of concern for her personally, was able to uncover that she was going through some personal things in her life, and we were able to get her some help and help her through her life challenges. And to me, that is so much more important to me as a leader than fixing the attendance problem, or those types of things. So again, we talk a lot about legacy in leadership, and what at the end of the day, what kind of impact do you want to have on people? And yes, results are important, but to me, the fun part of leadership is being able to help people along the way.
Right. And the challenge sometimes is because I've also had cases, of course, when I was leading teams not just in my own company, but at other companies that I worked at, where you maybe have, although the overall team wasn't small, but I didn't have like five team members for one area, right? I sometimes
Yeah.
had one or two. And then, of course, sometimes you run into this challenge of having to resolve a situation where somebody might need to be off work or might need some extra support, and then also finding a solution for that. Like, for example, what came to mind just now as you gave us your example, Scott, is I had somebody who occasionally suffered from panic attacks, right? So she needed to get the right support. Or I had somebody who had to take care of someone in her family on a frequent basis, and you cannot just remove this out of someone's life. You need to
Yeah.
somehow find a solution together, and not everybody is willing to actually talk this over with their leader so that they can actually get help. So I appreciate your
Yeah.
attitude there of wanting to find out, because also not all leaders, or should I say managers in this case, are willing to find out. Right.
Yeah.
So how then can a leader generally build someone's sense of value or of worth, if you prefer, without it turning into empty words? So not just verbally, right?
Yeah, I think it takes time, right? And I think it has to be genuine. I think that's the big thing about our style of leadership that we're teaching is it's got to be authentic, and you genuinely have to want to be a leader and want to help. But and over time, then it really is about getting to know each person and taking that time. I think it's the most complex part of leadership. It's not budgets, it's not strategy decks. It really is the complexity of getting to know the individual. And this is where when we talk about different levels of leadership in an organization, everybody has a role in this, right? So even your executive leaders, when we talk about servant leadership, they've got to look at things from a system perspective and look at things like org design and span of control. Because to your point earlier, I can't be effective as a leader if I have 30 direct reports. I can't get to know 30 people who report to me on an individual basis. So they need to be able to help say, okay, no more than six, eight, whatever that number is, so that we can be effective in our leadership. But then, you know, as I'm leading my team, it is about getting to know what are your strengths, what are your passions, what are your goals. You don't have to necessarily have to want to grow within our organization because I recognize not everybody wants to grow internally, and that's okay. But what are your goals so that I can help you in that pursuit? And what are you not good at so that I make sure that I'm not going to try to force you into doing some work maybe that goes against what your skills, and that all takes time. But when you do that, that's when employees start to feel seen and heard. And I think that is the key thing that's missing today. I think so many employees aren't feeling individually seen and valued. Their voices aren't being heard. And I think if we can get to that point, then employees are going to want to start to then give back in return, right? And that's that discretionary effort that you can't force. That you can do whatever you want to do to get compliance, but if you want to earn that extra effort that really drives those great results, you have to really earn that authentically and genuinely through this style of leadership.
Right. And again, style, right? The style
Yeah,
is not something that you do once one day and not the next day, but usually you develop it over time, and you refine it, you improve it. It's definitely something that can evolve over time, and the more we also are willing to look at ourselves and to be self-aware and to ask for feedback, of course, the easier that becomes. Not well, easier and not easier, because it also requires courage to do that, right?
yes,
It's not an easy process. That's not what I mean, but it becomes easier to actually improve over time.
yes,
And then to actually also lead through influence rather than through pressure, because we need to be able to respond in moments of pressure and deadlines. And that's when we cannot all of a sudden change everything, right? So it means
yeah,
being able to move through those difficult moments of pressure then really requires preparation. That's what I was going to
yeah.
say.
Yeah, and it's like, and you earn that, right? So if
Mhm.
every day, to your point, if you're consistently, it's the little moments that really add up. And so that
Mhm.
when you do have those moments of pressure, we're no one's going to be perfect. We get that. It's impossible for us to have, to be a perfect leader. But people will be much more willing to go along with us, and especially when we have our bad days, they're much more forgiving when they have that sense that we are genuinely, you know, there for them. We are trying, and we've got their back. And I think that is it's those messages that we send. Every interaction that we have with a team member sends a message. And so to me, it's when I leave, an employee leaves my presence, one thing that I always try to ask myself is, did that person leave my presence better off than they came to me, or worse off, or kind of the same? And my goal always is that they should at least leave the same as they came to me, if not better. And if I get the sense that they left worse, then I try to go and try to fix that, or at least make a point to follow up, because not every conversation goes well. But just know that, to your point, there's that influence. I don't think we recognize how influential our leadership is, and the ripple effect that our leadership has. And we do this exercise in our workshop where we ask people to think back on a time when a leader made them feel priceless or worthless, and just to write in a sentence or two, what did they say or do? And they're little things, little things that they said or did that made them feel this way. And when we ask them to share more about like when this happened in their life, these were things that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago. So these things that we do and say as leaders, they stick, and they have profound impacts on people's lives. And so knowing that, we can be proactive and hopefully go out and set out our day each day to try to make some positive ripples in people's lives.
Yeah, and you just said these things often happened a long time ago. And of
Yeah.
course, if they reinforce something that we might have experienced as children, then it has a
Mm,
much bigger impact still, because
yeah.
many of us had those moments as kids. I think almost everybody, if not everybody I know, right? Where we had those moments when even our parents or somebody, some adult or even another kid said something that hit us harder than anybody around us thought. And that's actually what a trauma is, when we cannot express our feelings in that, or our emotions in that moment. The emotions get stuck, and then we re-encounter a situation, or we encounter a situation that reminds us of that moment subconsciously. Then of course it hits us much harder. And of course, the people around us are not aware of this. So that's why it can
Yeah.
be relatively or seemingly little things, as you said, Scott, that have that effect. And as you were explaining this or describing this, what came to mind for myself was a specific situation in a meeting, when when it felt to me like my idea or comment was belittled.
Mm,
And that had a really big impact on me. It affected that relationship with that leader for quite a long time. I was quite young at the time, I didn't know as much as I know now. And I was much more easily impressed by situations like this. But we must remember that not everybody is equally resilient as we might be now. And
right.
that, those seemingly little comments often have a big impact. So I think it's a really important topic. That's why I'm expanding on it a little bit, because we underestimate those situations a lot.
Sure.
So talking about engagement, right? What's one behavior that instantly increases engagement, or another one that easily destroys it, if you don't mind sharing any examples?
Sure. I mean, I think the foundation of engagement is trust. So I think that's one thing that is important to measure. And again, I talk about engagement. It's so important that we know how our employees are feeling. And I am not a big fan of the once a year employee engagement survey, because I just think that's artificial intelligence, if you will. That I don't think it's a real accurate snapshot of how our people are really feeling. So uh, to really understand how people are feeling, I think we need to have much more frequent check-ins. And that's where I think leaders have that opportunity, whether, it's in one-on-ones, or building that relationship where people can truly open up and share what's inside. Because to your point, like your situation when you were younger, that that risk is that you would not open up again in a meeting. You wouldn't share those great ideas, or maybe you see something on a project plan that could potentially take that project and it get off track and it would fail, but you're now afraid to say anything because of the way that you were made to feel in that meeting, right? Unless I have that relationship with you as your leader to have that conversation and for you to open up and share that so that you we could get past it and get unstuck. Those are huge costs to the organization, not just in for you as an individual, but those are the conversations I think we need to be having more and more in the workplace. I also recognize it's probably one of the hardest skills as us as human beings to have are these crucial conversations and being able to open up and for leaders to be able to have hard conversations with employees about performance issues and things like that, but also for employees to open up and share, to our leaders about what's bothering us. But I think that skill is so, so important for us to work on.
Right. And you mentioned trust, and it's, of course, again, a very big topic. But what's the
Yeah.
fastest way, in your opinion, that a new leader can lose trust without realizing it?
I think there's a lot of things a new leader can do. One is, taking credit for work that the team does,
Yeah.
or not following up, not doing something that they say they're going to do. I think that is, simple things, right? Things like, okay, I'm going to have this information to you by the end of the day, and then you don't do that. That happens a few times. You lose credibility. Um, Again, it's not the big things. I think it really is the little things. And then what happens is, um, what I've noticed, our employees will start to become more quiet. They'll maybe, and you start taking that as, oh, okay, everybody's happy because they're not pushing back or they're not saying anything or they're just saying okay and they're just kind of complying, and we take that as things are going well. But what is really going on is the team has lost trust in me, and so now they're just kind of doing their own thing on the side, and they're not even listening to me anymore as the leader. And so again, so much of this is just paying attention to body language and tuning into uh what's going on around me as the leader, and not putting my head in the sand like an ostrich. uh, yeah, it's little things I think that we need to focus on.
Right. Yes, especially as little things to others often are big things, and the other way
Yeah,
around, right? So after those 30 something years in this space, Scott,
yeah.
what's something that's widely taught about leadership that you would fundamentally disagree with?
So I think one thing I disagree with is this expression that what gets measured gets done, right? And it's an expression that I've heard over and over and over again. And it's not that it's wrong, because it is true, but I think it is um, I think it's misunderstood or taken out of context. I think what it does is it drives people to focus on performance um, and doing whatever it takes to get the results. And what I've seen time and time and time again is when leaders focus on that and they focus on the results at any cost, that's when people get damaged. And that's when, right, decisions get made that impact negatively the employees or the team members. And that, to me, that is the biggest thing that I would love to try to solve or to try to coach leaders on is, to me, the first question that we should ask when making a decision is, what is the impact to the employees? Because when the employees aren't happy, it's hard to get anything else executed, right? You can have the best strategies, you can have the best tools, the best everything, but you have to recognize employees are the ones that have to bring that to life. They're the ones that are using those tools. They're the ones that have to talk to your customers. They're the ones that drive those results. So if they're not happy at the end of the day, it's going to be very hard for you to get those results. So to me, yes, results are important. Yes, performance is important, but don't do that at the sacrifice of your employees. And I've
Right.
seen it just too many
Yeah,
times.
absolutely agree. Yeah, sometimes it might work in the short term, like for a week, but
Yeah,
it's not sustainable
yeah,
because it wears people out. right?
Yes.
And enthusiasm definitely can create better results,
Yeah.
usually. So, so then on the other hand, when both people in performance truly thrive, so when both are fine, what's
Yeah.
consistently present in a culture where that happens?
Oh, there's excitement. There's just energy. There's such positive energy. Again, nobody wants to leave that kind of environment. When you're winning, when you're part of a winning team, right? And you've got because you do need you can't just have happy employees, right? You need to also have good strategies and good tools so that you can get the results. But when you're in that kind of environment, why would you ever want to leave that, right? And so that's when you see organizations truly getting the best results that they could possibly get. And those are the organizations that are able to grow, not just for a quarter or two or for the year, but for years and years and years to come. And that's the kind of team that I want to work for.
Okay. So if with everything that you have shared today with us, Scott, if someone listening wants to lead differently starting today, what's the first
Yeah.
move you tell them to make?
So the first thing I always say is again, focus on, and you can do this starting right now, is every human being that you see, tell yourself, remind yourself that that person is priceless, right? Everybody is priceless. I go to the airport when you're in the supermarket. It's kind of fun. Like just go, you're priceless, you're priceless. Don't say it out loud because you'll probably get arrested, but just tell yourself, right? Every person has a story. I think it's incredible to think about each person that's walking around this planet right now has an incredible story to tell, right? They have a movie inside them, and they've had struggles and they've had ups and downs, and when you get to know somebody's story, it really is hard not to fall in love with them and to want to cheer for them and want to help them, and so from a leadership perspective, that to me is the first step. See them as priceless, and then get to know them, and I think that is going to set you up for much greater success.
Yeah, and if you do it out, if you say it out aloud, maybe you
Yeah,
get
don't
the
say it out loud.
smiles, right? Because you know what? I was walking in a park the other day in New York City, and I was walking behind a lady who had a hoodie on with a message on the back, and it said something like, "You walking behind me, the world is a better place with you in it."
Oh, oh, it's so
Isn't that
nice. So
beautiful?
true. And it's so true.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fun. You can do it, but again, we talked about this earlier. It's simple stuff. It's not easy because you really have to work on it every day. But if you can tune into your thoughts and really take control of your own thoughts, it's incredible what it does, even for your own emotions, right? When someone cuts me off in traffic now, it's the first thing I do is I tell myself that person driving the car is priceless, right? And guess what? I don't know what's going on in their life. They could be trying to get to the hospital because their wife is in labor. I don't know.
Right.
And just by me changing my thoughts, it changes how I feel in that moment. And then I don't do something I'm going to regret, by honking or doing something stupid. So again, I think so much of what drives our behaviors in life really do stem from what we're telling ourselves in those stories. And so kind of taking control of that is so important.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that,
Yeah.
Scott. So that was a really nice way to close it out, actually. So I'm going to leave it here, but I do want to know where people can most easily connect with you.
Yeah, the best way is just to go to our website, which is nationalald.com. And
Hmm.
everything is right on the website.
Okay, great. nationalald.com. Amazing. So, Scott, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today and leaving us with so many golden nuggets. And to all listeners, I look forward to having you with us again next time. Your life looks successful on the outside, but doesn't feel right on the inside anymore. If you're done performing and ready to feel fully alive, go to transformyourperformance.com/success now what. If it resonates, we'll take it further together. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe, share it, and join us next time.